Hi, I'm Tyler with the Great Catholic Book Club. Today, I want to talk to you about Wordsworth's poem, The Character of the Happy Warrior, and Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander. Two works that ask the question, how do you show up for the people who depend on you? Within that, we're going to talk about three things. First, how I had to learn to lead my own family. Second, what Christ can teach us about self-mastery. And lastly, attitude is everything. Let's start with Admiral Nelson. If you've read Patrick O'Brien's Master and Commander, or even if you've just seen the movie, then you know that the character of Captain Jack Aubrey is constantly referencing Admiral Nelson. He wants to emulate him. He wants to be just like him. He thinks that Admiral Nelson is the very model of what a ship captain should be. Admiral Horatio Nelson died in 1805 at the Battle of Trafalgar, the greatest naval victory in British history. He defeated a combined French and Spanish force and saved the British Empire from Napoleon's invasion. But Nelson didn't just win battles. He inspired people. His men loved him, and they would follow him anywhere. And the reason they loved him wasn't just that he was brilliant, though he was. He led from the front. He had lost an arm in battle. He lost an eye. He was constantly in danger, but he always showed up, confident, cheerful, and focused on doing his duty. At the Battle of Trafalgar, his last message to the British fleet was that England expects that every man will do his duty. And when he was shot by a French sniper in the middle of his greatest victory, his last words were, "Thank God, I have done my duty." And that kind of self-mastery, the kind of man who does his duty with joy, even unto death, is what made Nelson great. So William Wordsworth, one of the great Romantic poets, wrote a poem in 1806 to honor Nelson. And he asked the question, what made this man so great? What virtues define true heroism? And his answer was the happy warrior. Who is the happy warrior? Who is he that every man in arms should wish to be? It is the generous spirit who, when brought among the tasks of real life, hath wrought upon the plan that pleased his boyish thought, whose high endeavors are an inward light that makes the path before him always bright. 'Tis he whose law is reason, who depends upon that law as on the best of friends. The happy warrior, a man who faces life's battles, not with bitterness or complaint, but with joy, with self-mastery, and with the unshakable inner peace that comes from doing his duty. So for me, this 200-year-old poem about naval warfare has everything to do with being a husband and father today. When I first got married and started having kids, there was a lot I didn't understand about leadership. I thought that being a husband and a father meant that you show up, you provide, you work hard, and I was doing that. But I was showing up with a terrible attitude. And here's what I told myself to justify it. I work hard, I provide for this family, I deserve some respect. But what I didn't see at the time, and honestly, I would have denied it if somebody had asked, my definition of respect was that I was buying the right to treat my family however I wanted to. I was buying permission to be resentful and immature. I didn't see it at the time, but there it was. In hindsight, that was the effect of my actions, and there's no getting around it. And here's the thing. No one owes you gratitude if you complain the whole time.
Okay, fine, but I'm gonna complain the whole time.
Yeah!
Having a good attitude isn't just about being nice. It's part of the duty, an essential part. Because my kids are watching to see if having a family is something worth wanting, and not just something to begrudgingly get through. I realized at some point that having a family wasn't something that just happened to me. This is my calling, this is my vocation, this is my purpose. And my kids and my wife need to know that there's no place I'd rather be, and that every bit of it is worth it, even if it costs me an arm or an eye. If I show up every day in a bad mood, like fatherhood is just a burden to resent, then I'm teaching them that a family isn't something you should want, that it's a dismal chore to avoid. But if I can show up cheerful, eager, and in a good mood, I can show them that family is something good. It's something to aspire to, and hopefully someday they'll want to emulate that. And that's how you build a legacy that lasts for generations. Not by working harder and not by making more money, but showing my kids that being their dad and loving their mom is the best thing I could possibly be doing with my life. That's why it's a duty. So back to Admiral Nelson. Remember, he lost an arm and an eye in battle, and he still showed up cheerful and confident. Why? Because his men needed to see that the mission was worth it, that there was no place he'd rather be. The happy warrior doesn't wait for perfect conditions, for everything to go right around him and for people to act the way he wants them to act. He creates those conditions through self-mastery. So I had to admit that if I had a problem, then maybe I was the problem, because it's the captain who sets the tone for the ship. So where was I going to learn to be the happy warrior, to set the right tone for my ship? Ephesians 5:25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. It's not love your wife if she respects you, or be cheerful for your children if they appreciate it, or sacrifice if they deserve it. It's just love, sacrifice, self-gift, period. This is the self-mastery that frees me from being a slave to my expectations of others and being dependent on things outside of myself for my own emotional actions. That's what it means to be the happy warrior, to be unshakably dependable. And the Gospels show us that Christ is the ultimate happy warrior. If you want to know what real self-mastery is, what the freedom to choose your duty over your own feelings is, you look at him. Let me give you 2 examples from the Gospels. First is in Matthew 14, when Jesus learns that John the Baptist has been beheaded. This is John, his cousin, his childhood friend, and he's just learned that he's been executed by Herod. And Jesus' response is, in Matthew 14:13, to withdraw to a desolate place to mourn. He needs time to be alone. But the crowds follow him with all their expectations and all the things they need from him, at a time when in his human nature it would be understandable for him not to have much to give. Jesus is grieving. He has every human reason to say, "Not now. I'm grieving. Go away." But Matthew 14:14 says this, "When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick." He chose their need for him over his own grief. In this entire passage, he demonstrates perfect self-mastery. He puts the needs of his flock over his own comfort. And that's the happy warrior in action. And then we get to the cross. On the way to his execution, while carrying the instrument of his own death, Jesus stops to comfort the women of Jerusalem. That's Luke 23:28. And on the cross itself, while he's suffering unimaginable pain, he acts with perfect responsibility for all that are under his care. He forgives his executioners, cares for his mother, and charges the Apostle John to tend to her. He gives mercy to the thief beside him. He's thinking about maintaining his spiritual responsibilities to other people while being crucified. He's basically maintaining his frame and keeping everyone else supported in that while he's hanging on the cross. If Jesus can do that, then I can choose to have a good attitude when I come home from work after a long day. I can make that the frame, and I can bring that tone into my own household. And that's what I needed to do. That's the element that I was missing. A clear way to emulate, to imitate Jesus on the cross in my own life and with my own family. Going back to Master and Commander, Jack Aubrey is constantly trying to emulate Admiral Nelson. And what made Nelson great was his ability to inspire his men and to set the tone. Remember, Nelson had been through hell. He lost an arm and an eye, and he still chose to show up cheerful and confident. And this is where I get into the ship metaphor. My family is the crew, and I'm the captain, and we are the good ship Woodley. And we find it easy to understand. If the captain panics, the crew panics. And if the captain shows up grumpy and resentful, the crew is going to be anxious and on edge. But if the captain is calm, confident, and even joyful in rough seas, the crew trusts him and they stay steady. It's worth mentioning here that you can also read the story of Christ in the storm in Matthew 8. It makes the same point. For my 4 kids, it's not their problem if I've had a hard day at work or if I'm tired. They only care that I'm home, and they definitely notice if I'm not smiling. They need to know that I have it under control. Not that everything's perfect, but that I'm steady, because that gives them security and peace. And they're learning, whether I realize it or not, whether or not a family is something worth having, whether they want to grow up and have their own ships. That's on me, and I had to figure out what to do about it. So here's what I learned about setting the tone. It happens in 3 ways. First, emotionally. I just had to start smiling more. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it made a huge difference. If I walk in the door smiling, my family feels safe. If I walk in the door grumpy, tension fills the whole house. I am the thermostat for the emotional temperature in my home. That's not a metaphor, that's just how it is. I had to learn that smiling is about responsibility, not feelings. I don't get to wait until I feel like smiling. I smile because my family needs that from me. Second, physically. Taking care of myself, being well-groomed, well-dressed, working out, watching what I eat. This matters for attitude because it's impossible to lead from a place of confidence if you look like you've given up on yourself. If I show up looking like a slob, like I don't care, I'm not going to feel calm or solid, and I can't project the steadiness that my family needs. Taking care of myself physically is a signal, first to myself and then to my family. It shows that I respect myself, that I'm rising to the occasion. Looking good means looking forward to it, whatever it is. And when I feel good about how I'm showing up, I can actually lead with confidence instead of just faking it. Third, and most importantly, spiritually. If my spiritual life is a chaotic mess, if I'm not praying, if I'm not receiving the sacraments, if I am holding on to sins and refusing to let go of them, then I don't have the moral standing to lead my family. Then I can only lead from a place of insecurity, of false faith. I can only act the part instead of living it. And my family can sense the difference. They know the difference between me when I'm solid in my faith and when I'm just playing the role of Catholic dad. The father is the domestic priest of the home. That's my vocation. If I'm not pursuing holiness myself, if my relationship with Jesus Christ is shallow or fake, then I'm not leading. I'm just putting on a performance. And you can't build a family on a performance. Now, when I consistently do these things, something shifts in my home, not just in them, but in me. Back to Nelson's last words. Thank God I have done my duty. I get it. He's talking about this peace that comes from doing your duty well, regardless of reward. That's what the happy warrior knows. Being that guy to my family and to myself is its own reward. Now, this is all Catholic vocation stuff, being a husband and a father. But Wordsworth wasn't Catholic when he wrote the character of the happy warrior. And Patrick O'Brian wasn't thinking about Ephesians 5 when he created the character of Jack Aubrey. But truth is truth, and beauty is beauty. When I read the happy warrior or master and commander through the lens of faith, through the lens of what's good, beautiful, and true, I can clearly see Christ. I can see the path to virtue and what it means to be fully human. So if you want the full text of Wordsworth's poem, I'll put a link in the description. And if this resonated with you, if you are trying to grow in virtue and self-mastery to serve the people you love, then join our book club over at greatcatholicbookclub.com. We're reading literature in 2026 through the lens of faith. Master and Commander is one of our selections, as is The Power and the Glory and the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Check out our website for a full reading list and to join up. We'd love to have you. Let's become happy warriors together.